Rukinga Haupapa, and the two of them who you saw on the video earlier, both who have had income protection insurance. They've been two amongst the minority of New Zealanders that have it, and they've both benefited from it. So I have a number of questions. Obviously you saw their videos, and you'll be able to see them online later, and there are longer videos that you can see as well. But my first question is going to go to Rukingi, and Rukingi took out insurance with Asteron. I understand it was sold to him rather than him necessarily thinking, I need some income protection insurance, but he's somebody that really benefited from it. And so it was around about sometime between 2000 and 2002 when he took out his policy. Probably, like most of us, felt 10 foot tall and bulletproof. But I'd just like to ask Rukingi, why did you take the income protection insurance out with Asteron?
Well, my wife and I, we've got 4 daughters. And of course, you know, me being the dad, I was forever running around after my grandsons and granddaughters. And then we decided you guys need to have your own house instead of renting a house. Can you guys save money here, you know, to get you a house and so on? No, okay, all right. So my wife and I, we decided to mortgage our house. So for 2 of the daughters, that's what we did. I didn't realise because all the mortgages and everything were then piled on top of me. And it wasn't until I saw the presentation this morning and I was thinking, I'm pretty sure it must have been my blooming insurance broker who told me I probably needed to have income insurance. So when you asked me a few days ago, I thought that I was the clever person that thought I needed it, but this morning I would think that it must have been the broker, because we ended up with all the mortgage on top of us, my wife and I.
Yeah. I'm sure you were very clever to take the broker's advice, and because I'm sure there's a lot of brokers who give advice and then the clients simply don't take the insurances, so to actually taken it and to benefit from it. Now, this experience of having a stroke has led you into doing research into the field of stroke, and particularly with Māori and with whānau in your area in the Bay of Plenty. Can you please just tell us a bit more about your research with stroke victims amongst your whānau and in your region, please?
As Don said, stroke, just like all the illnesses, I was bulletproof and invincible, you know, once upon a time. Not anymore. And I decided that I needed to learn more about these illnesses. And with stroke, we thought that I was the only unlucky in the whole world to catch this thing, stroke, which none of our family knew anything about it. Then when we had a quick look around the house that we lived in, suddenly we were surrounded by families all around us that had been quietly hiding for generations. And so therefore we started a stroke group, and once everybody realised that I hadn't died, because I disappeared from the planet, so they all thought I just died. But when I started turning up, you know, people that you relate to, they all, oh yeah, we've got an auntie, we've got a cousin, we've got a nephew. And so where I live, it's only one little part around Rotorua, and then very quickly we started rotating around Lake Rotorua, and all the other families started hosting it. As I started to see all of that, then I really started to worry, and when I heard some of the data that was just touched on, and I thought, wow, I knew nothing about stroke. Now I'm starting to get really worried about it, and which eventually led to me doing the Masters, which was not easy. Oh, well, the Bachelor wasn't easy either. Come to think about it, yeah, a couple of years, or 18 months after I had the stroke, I was a teacher for a long time, and my daughter said to me, well, Dad, well, what are you going to do? You know, yes, you've got income insurance and da-da-da-da, but what are you going to do? And I said, well, I don't know. Well, what did I used to do? And it was education. So I said, okay, well, education, okay. So I went to one university. Then a daughter tells me that I didn't like that particular university because I'd lost my memory. So then I suddenly started to learn a whole lot of things about not just learning, but specific learning. Which eventually led to the Masters, so that I wasn't just learning anything. I wanted to learn about this illness, and in this case, just in the area where I live. So our tribe is from just east of Tauranga down to Lake Taupo, and so that's the families that were involved. So that was with the Masters, and now I've just started into doctorate. So I graduated at the beginning of this year. We had the graduation, of course my mum and dad were there, and yeah, I'm quite lucky that my mum and dad are alive, and of course everybody was celebrating, but I said to Mum, I'm carrying on, I'm going to do this blimmin' doctorate thing, and she goes, why? And I said, because. But I think a lot of what I'm hearing this morning, you know, why? Because my family is saying, well, why are you coming to this thing up in Auckland? And I said, well, I think once I started hearing stories from these families, I started to separate into physical needs, learning needs, and spiritual needs. And I thought, well, the income insurance for me, because I had it, but I met a lot of other families who did it. I've seen exactly the difference, night and day difference.
And I understand there were 2 out of 9 of the families that you studied that had income protection insurance, and the
Yep.
others didn't.
Yep.
Yep. Now I'll address the question to Lisa. Now Lisa, you've used your income protection insurance more than once.
Yes.
You've had periods more than once, and in each instance you had a 3-month stand-down period,
Sorry.
and before the insurance payments kicked in. And you talked about living off savings and the largesse of family when we were speaking last week. With your time over again, would you pay more to get a shorter stand-down period?
I suspect not. I think the thing always to weigh up about income insurance, as with all insurances, which of course you don't need till you need them, is that it's very, it's quite a big chunk of your income. And I haven't done the figures, so I can't say for sure whether I would be prepared to pay the extra. But I think what it has made me think about is perhaps doing some better savings and some better planning so that I have that 3-month buffer. And I suppose it's like normal insurance as well. If you always have to pay a premium, or you have a percentage that you don't get, so you kind of allow for that whenever you make an insurance claim or when you plan for your insurance. So 3 months is pretty reasonable. I know you can pay a bit more and have a lesser stand down.
It's a shame that our speaker from the Cancer Society didn't hear that, because she had concerns about those stand-down periods. How much did it cost you each month? Do you remember?
About $450, I think. So that was based on an earlier salary. And just to what we were saying before, is that I also did not choose to have my own income insurance. I set up a small business, and my office manager was my sister. So she insisted we get everything done properly, and so we had both my business partner and myself ended up with income insurance, which I tell you I would never have had. But just because I know I wouldn't have got around to thinking about it probably. I would have thought that ACC would have covered anything that happened to me, or that, like you, I was invulnerable and wouldn't have been an issue. But fortunately, my sister had a wiser head, and I just didn't ever drop the income insurance. And it was some years later, of course, that I actually needed it.
And I'm sure you were very grateful for it.
Very grateful to my sister.
Yeah. Rukingi, you said that it would be kapai if the industry could forge more links with iwi, and so that more of your people could have income protection cover. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
In the Masters research, I actually interviewed them whether they actually had income insurance or not. And the doctorate research is going to be doing the same. So what little I can remember about income insurance is pretty that much. So I think today is a big one for me. Just seeing the background that's on one of those sheets of paper. If the families just knew the difference between income coming into the house versus that income not coming into the house. The reality for us is that we can become part of the, because we've been through it. That's the thing too, is we've met so many of these families. So I think it makes it easier for us to talk with families. I'm focusing on ones who have suffered the illness, but I'm going to meet a lot of people like the movers and shakers within their own iwi. And so for me, knowing just a little bit of information we've had this morning, for me it's just opened up the eyes. And we have a lot of people that, like my 4 daughters, are all professionals, and I was talking with one daughter that I was with this morning, and I said, have you got income insurance? She goes, no. I said, why not? And but I didn't have enough information myself. So when I get back, I'll be giving one of those simple sheets that you're given. You can't avoid it. It's right there in front of you.
Yeah, I'm sure at lunchtime there'll be many people here from the industry who you could meet and talk to. So, so Lisa, in all the years you were paying your insurance, were you tempted to stop paying? $400 a month, it's, you know, it seems at the time like it's dead money.
Well, it does, and yes, I'm sure I did at times, and it just kept on chugging on with it. I suppose because I had a little tweak with it, I had a, not cancer, but I had a small issue with my eye, which I didn't manage very well, and so I ended up probably not maximising the use of the income insurance, but what I did do, it made me think about it, so I had a period of not being able to work. And although I think I only ended up with perhaps a couple of months of insurance covering bills, it was enough to make me realise that it would be quite useful if something worse happened, and then it did. So perhaps it was a good lesson. Didn't seem so at the time, but...
And you've become a bit of an advocate for income protection insurance with those around you, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, I don't mean it was a lifesaver at all, but it was certainly a lifestyle saver for me. You know, and it did mean I could pay bills and pay my mortgage, and I suppose there are people, I mean, there's always that balance, isn't there? There are people who have large savings, and their argument's always if you put that amount of money into a pot somewhere and don't touch it, and then you draw on that when you need to. So A, you have to be able to save that amount of money, not spend it, which wouldn't work for me. And B, I think those costs add up much more than you think. So it's certainly worked out, not, you know, my back of the envelope calculations I've done, it's certainly been hugely beneficial for me. And yes, absolutely, I advocate it and say, people think about it perhaps if you have your own business, but of course it's just as important if you don't have your own business, if you're just a regular wage or salary earner.
We all have to pay our mortgages whether we have a business or not.
Sadly, yes.
Rukingi, a question from the audience. Can you tell us more about how you and your whānau dealt with memory loss related to your stroke?
One daughter and her family moved into our house, and it's only a little 2-bedroom house. So I get a couple and their 2 children in with us, and very quickly I learned how to fight for a remote so I didn't have to watch children's programs all day. So I think the neat thing and meeting a lot of these other families, a lot of the strategies that they shared, some of them are quite simple. Depending on the cultures that we are in. So when something hits bad in our family, everybody swoop in and somebody will find a way to help. It doesn't pay the bills, but it relieves some of the other pressures. So I think for me, learning that was one of the huge things that I learnt within 2 years. Yeah.
Yes. And look, I believe that you're going to do more study about income protection insurance and the iwi. What are your future goals there?
I'll be interested to see what your website is, because just talking with my daughter last night and my wife this morning, yes, I think for me I've got to start with my own family, and we go from there.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to go out and broadcast to the world.
Sure.
I think we need to prove in our own family. So the neat thing for me is I'm an example of what you do get when you do have income insurance.
Yes.
So I'm the classic example. And so I think in the world I live in too, the more grey your hair gets, the more likely people start listening to you. True, simply because you seem to have been around a little bit longer, so maybe you've experienced things a little bit more. And in this case, that's one thing that I have,
Yes.
which most of our family don't.
One last question from the floor. Both of you, can you explain any increased costs you had as a result of living with the illness, and how long those costs, the duration of those costs was?
Not for me. I'm well insured, and I've got very comprehensive health insurance as well. So from a health perspective, no extra costs. But I think just looking at what you were saying as well, it's maybe it's a New Zealand thing, maybe it's just what people do when you're in time of trouble. So the support comes. People gather around, and we know that, and I'm sure everyone who's been through any major health issue knows what happens. Your friends come around, family come around, you find you've got people popping out of the woodwork who perhaps you wouldn't have thought of, and people are fabulous, but of course that doesn't pay the bills. And that's the thing that just is so important. And for myself, I don't have a partner, so the money I make is the money I pay out, and the money that comes in and goes out. So there's no buffer to say, well, somebody else can perhaps pick up the slack for a bit, because that's something you can't ask of people. People can provide all the meals, they can provide the comfort, the shoulder to scream and yell on, and all those sorts of things. But that monetary thing is so crucial, and we sort of forget that because we talk about sickness a lot, and we talk about how wonderful people are and how you need support. But of course, it's the harsh realities of life is that if you don't have some income coming in, you can't pay the bills that need to go out. And that's sort of my really big learning, is that it sits alongside the stuff we get from our communities. So it's not an either or, it's just, to me, it was a really, really important part of my getting well, because it was a stress that was taken away. So I suppose that's my flag I go out with. Say absolutely, and because people say, oh, but my family are fabulous, or my community's been fabulous, and they absolutely are, as you know what it's like, but it's when it comes to cold hard cash, that's what the reality of income insurance is, and that's why it's just imperative, I say.
Thank you. And just last, Rukini, quickly, were there any additional costs for you as a result of your illness?
Not financial, but of course my wife she took the buffer for everything. So I think the income insurance took a lot of the pressure off her, but of course it was all the other needs that I needed as well as my wife. So yeah, I think we're 10 years later. 10 years ago I had the stroke, and 10 years now I almost know what happened. Yeah. So I think whether you can understand what you're being told to immediately when you have these illnesses, well, it didn't work for me. But in terms of income insurance, yes, huge benefit. But it took the pressure off my wife.
Well, thank you both of you, and please join me in thanking them.